All right, time to dive into Honda Motors. We're taking a look at their annual report for 2023. That covers the fiscal year ending on March 31st, 2024.
So that's pretty recent then.
Very recent.
Yeah.
We're not just looking at the numbers, though. We're going to explore what those numbers tell us about Honda's performance, their strategies, and where they're headed.
Yeah, we're getting like a behind-the-scenes look then. We'll see how different parts of the business are doing, their financial wins and challenges, and how they plan to stay ahead in an industry that's changing so rapidly.
Exactly. So Honda's business is more than just cars. They actually have a lot of different business segments. Maybe we could start with their most iconic one, motorcycles.
Yeah, motorcycles are really core to Honda, and their global reach is reflected in their sales. They sold 12,219,000 motorcycles in fiscal year 2024, which is actually a slight increase over last year, which is pretty impressive when you think about some of the global economic headwinds they faced.
Yeah. And it's also interesting to see how sales broke down geographically. They saw growth in markets like India, Brazil, and Turkey, but declines in Vietnam and Thailand. What do you make of those regional differences?
It speaks to the different stages of development and consumer preferences in those markets. India, for example, has a rapidly growing middle class. They want affordable and fuel-efficient transportation, which plays to Honda's strengths.
Oh, yeah.
But they also have to adapt to changing trends. A big story here is Honda's bet on electric motorcycles.
Yeah. They're not shying away from that EV revolution. They're planning to launch more than 10 electric motorcycle models by 2026, aiming to sell 1 million units in that time frame. That's a serious commitment.
It's a bold move for sure. Shows they're thinking long term. They're not just dipping their toes in the water. They're going all in.
All right. So motorcycles are revving up. But what about their main thing, the automobile business? This is where we see some really impressive growth.
Absolutely. Honda saw a 19.9% surge in sales, hitting 2,856,000 units. A big chunk of that came from the United States, where demand for Hondas remains strong.
So their reputation for reliability is paying off. But they can't just coast on that forever, especially with how fast EVs are growing. So how are they balancing their existing gas-powered vehicle business while also needing to go electric?
It's a balancing act for sure, like walking a tightrope. They're trying to strengthen their gas-powered business while also putting resources into EV development. It's something a lot of car companies are dealing with right now.
Right. It makes you wonder if it's even possible to do both well, or if something has to give.
It is the big question. It'll be interesting to see how that strategy evolves in the next few years.
Yes. Now let's round out our tour of their business segments. Let's look at power products and other businesses. This category covers a lot of different things: generators, lawnmowers, robotic.
Yeah, a pretty interesting mix. It speaks to their engineering strength and their ability to apply their technology to a lot of different products. However, this segment did see a drop in sales. They sold 3,812,000 units in fiscal year 2024, which is down 32.5% from the year before. North America was a big factor in that.
Wow, that's a pretty steep drop. What do you think caused that?
Probably a lot of different factors. The global economic slowdown, shifts in consumer spending, and maybe more competition in some areas. But here's something interesting I noticed. Even though units sold went down, revenue from external customers only decreased by 13%.
Huh. That does seem counterintuitive. How do we explain that?
It's just the impact of foreign currency translation. Honda operates globally, so when all their reports are consolidated back into Japanese yen, fluctuations in exchange rates can have a big impact.
So sometimes the revenue numbers don't tell the whole story.
Exactly.
Okay, so we need to remember these numbers are affected by a lot of outside factors. We've explored the different parts of their business, but now let's take a closer look at their financials.
Yeah, let's see what makes this machine tick.
First, give us the overview. How did Honda do financially in fiscal year 2024?
Overall, pretty good. 16,907,725 million yen in consolidated sales revenue, which led to an operating profit of 780,769 million yen, and a profit attributable to owners of 700,807 million yen.
So positive results overall, but we need to look closer to really understand what drove that. Let's start with the income statement. What were the trends we saw for revenue and operating profit across the different business segments?
The motorcycle business did pretty well, slight increase in sales revenue. But operating profit went down a bit, mainly because of higher expenses. The automobile business was the star. Revenue and profit both went way up because of those great sales numbers.
And how about power products and other businesses?
It's mixed. Like we talked about, revenue from customers was down 13%, reflecting those lower sales numbers. But operating profit was affected by a few things, including foreign currency effects.
Hold on, can you explain what foreign currency effects are?
Sure, think of it like this. Honda makes money all over the world in different currencies. But when they report their results, it all has to be in Japanese yen. So if the yen weakens against other currencies, it can make revenue and profit look bigger, even if they didn't actually sell more.
Ah, I see. So it's another reminder that these numbers are affected by the global economy.
Yeah.
Okay, let's look at some specifics from the income statement. What else stood out to you?
A couple things. First, overall expenses went up, especially selling, general, and administrative expenses. That lowered their operating profit a little. Second, their R&D spending shows their commitment to innovation. They're investing in developing new tech and products.
That's a good sign. They're not just resting on their laurels,
Yeah.
actively preparing for the future. Speaking of the future, let's look at the balance sheet. What does it tell us about their overall financial health?
Their balance sheet looks really solid. They have a strong cash position with plenty of cash and cash equivalents. That shows good financial stability.
That's always good for investors. What about other items on the balance sheet? Receivables, inventories, property, plant, and equipment.
Receivables, which is money customers owe to Honda, increased, which makes sense because their sales grew. Inventories also went up, probably reflecting them increasing production to meet that higher demand. And their property, plant, and equipment, which represents their long-term investments, remained about the same.
So they're managing their assets well, generating revenue, investing in growth, and keeping a solid financial foundation. Now let's get to the cash flow statement, maybe the most important financial statement there is.
Couldn't agree more. Cash flow is so important for any business. And Honda's statement shows some interesting things.
What were some of the things that stood out to you?
The biggest thing is they're generating a lot of cash from their operating activities. That's the foundation of their financial strength. This strong cash flow lets them fund those capital expenditures. Like we mentioned before, 3,141.1 billion yen.
Wow, that's huge. And they could do that while still having positive free cash flow.
Yeah. Free cash flow, which is what's left over after paying for operations and capital expenditures, is really important for investors. It's the money the company can use to pay dividends, buy back shares, reduce debt, or other things. The fact that Honda can keep investing like that and still have positive free cash flow shows how efficient and profitable their operations are.
Okay, so they're in a good financial position, investing in growth, have strong free cash flow. But what about returning value to shareholders? What about dividends and share buybacks?
Honda is definitely committed to rewarding their shareholders. They announced they'll continue their semi-annual dividend payouts with an interim and a year-end dividend. For this fiscal year, the interim dividend was 87 yen per share, and the year-end dividend was 39 yen.
That's good to hear for income-seeking investors. And how about share buybacks? How are they approaching that?
They see it as a way to improve their capital efficiency. They do it strategically when it makes sense. And right now they have a lot of treasury stock. So it gives them flexibility in how they manage their capital and return value.
All right, so we have a good understanding of Honda's finances. They're doing well, but what about the future?
Now things get really interesting. In part 2, we'll look at their plans for growth, challenges, and what it all means for the future. Welcome back. In the last part, we looked at a lot of things, from their different business segments to their financial performance. Now I think we should look at their plans for the future.
Yeah, for sure. We looked at the numbers. But now I'm really curious about their strategy. What are their big plans for growth in the coming years?
I think one word sums it up: electrification. It's clear from this annual report that Honda is all in on electrifying both motorcycles and cars.
Yeah, we talked about those targets for electric motorcycles. 1 million units sold by 2026 and 4 million by 2030. But what about cars? What's their plan for EVs?
They want to completely change their lineup. They've set some pretty aggressive targets for EV sales, and you can see that reflected in their investments.
Yeah, but every company is making big promises about EVs these days. So what are the concrete steps Honda's taking? It can't just be talk.
They're taking a multi-pronged approach. First, they're forming partnerships and collaborations. For example, they're working with LG Energy Solution to build a battery factory in North America. They want to start mass production by 2025.
So they're getting those batteries they'll need. That makes sense, given how much competition there is for those resources. What else are they doing?
They're not just focused on the batteries we have now. They're also investing a lot in next-generation batteries, like semi-solid state and all solid-state batteries.
Those seem to be getting a lot of attention. What makes them so special?
They could really change the game. Imagine being able to charge your car in the same time it takes to fill up your gas tank. That's the kind of breakthrough we're talking about. Honda wants to be leading that.
So they're not just thinking out the next few years, they're thinking long term.
Right.
What about the kinds of electric vehicles they're going to make?
They're doing a good job tailoring their products to different regions. In Japan, they're making a small commercial mini EV called the N-Van E, which is going to be released in fall 2024. They're also going to release mini EVs for personal use in Japan in 2025.
I like that. They're thinking about specific parts of the market, not just trying to make one car for everyone. But what about other places like North America and Europe?
Well, they've said they're going to release some small EVs in 2026, focused on the joy of driving. It seems like they're trying to keep their sporty image as they go electric. I wonder how those will do in markets where bigger vehicles are more popular.
That's a good point. Consumer preferences are different all over the world. All right, so we've talked about their EV plans, but we should be realistic too. There are going to be some serious challenges, right?
Oh, absolutely. Honda is very upfront in their report about the difficulties ahead. They talk about the global economic slowdown, geopolitical risks, and regulations that are constantly changing, especially emissions regulations.
Yeah, those are some big problems. How do they plan to deal with all that?
They're trying to be smart with how they use their resources, making sure they invest in areas that will grow, while also keeping their existing business strong. They also have a good risk management plan to help them handle all the uncertainty.
So they're not ignoring the risks. They're being proactive. But what about things inside the company that could affect profitability?
A few things stand out in the report. First, putting so much money into EV development might put a strain on other parts of the business. Second, financial services are getting more competitive, which could affect their financial services business. And they mention post-employment benefits as something that could affect their profits.
Post-employment benefits, what's that?
It's things like pensions and healthcare costs for retired employees. It costs companies a lot. It's definitely something for investors to keep in mind.
Okay, so they've got a lot on their plate. Ambitious plans, but lots of challenges too. But let's zoom out for a minute. What does Honda's story tell us about the car industry as a whole?
What's interesting is Honda's journey is happening at the same time. As the entire auto industry is changing, the change to electric vehicles is happening. We just don't know how fast or how smoothly it will be.
It's a very exciting time to be watching this. Traditional car makers like Honda are having to reinvent themselves, adapt to new tech, new demands, and new competition. I think Honda can do it, though. What do you think?
They've got a history of innovation, a reputation for quality and reliability, and they really understand their customers. The big question is, how will their strategy work out over the long term? And how will it affect the car industry in general, especially their competitors who are also making EVs?
Those are some good questions to think about. We've covered a lot in this deep dive. Maybe we should take a quick break and then come back to wrap things up and share some final thoughts. Okay, we're back. After looking at everything, I'm feeling pretty optimistic about their future.
I can see why. We've gone over their financials, growth plans, the challenges, and it seems like they're approaching it the right way, with a sense of purpose and a commitment to being innovative.
Exactly. They're not just going after whatever is popular right now. It's more like they're trying to shape the future. And I was really struck by how much they talk about their values.
Right. Their idea of being a company that society wants to have around, it's not just something they say. It feels like it's a real part of how they do things.
For sure. In the report, they talk about wanting to have a positive impact on the world.
Yeah.
And you can see that in what they do. They're focused on the environment, social responsibility, and safety.
Yeah, and that goal they set, to have 0 traffic deaths from their vehicles by 2050. That's a big statement. It shows how seriously they take safety.
It's a vision of the future where transportation is efficient and fun, but also really safe. And that focus on doing good extends to their employees too.
They talk about the evolution of human capital management, investing in how their employees grow, creating opportunities, and making sure they have enough people and the right people.
So they get that their employees are the most important thing.
Which is really smart, especially in an industry that's changing so fast.
Yeah. You're only as good as your people. Yeah. And Honda seems to be building the kind of place where people can do their best work, come up with new ideas, and help the company succeed.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Their financials, their plans for growth, their values, and how they treat their employees. What's the big takeaway here for our listeners? What should they be paying attention to as Honda's story keeps going?
Here's something to think about. Honda is putting a lot of their chips on electrification, but they're also realistic about how tough things are. The global economy is hard to predict. There are more geopolitical risks, and regulations always seem to be changing.
Yeah, so it's not going to be easy. But that's also what makes it exciting. How will they balance innovation and managing risk? How will their EV strategy work in different markets? And how will their values guide their decisions?
It'll be fascinating to watch. I think Honda has what it takes to make it through.
Me too. This deep dive has given us a lot to think about. Thanks for joining us as we explored Honda Motors. Until next time, keep learning and keep asking those good questions.